The views and opinions in the following program remain those of the producer and in no way reflect the views and opinions of Medford Community Cablevision, its board of directors, management, or other affiliates.
Hello, sports fans. I'm your host, Jim Tuberosa, for the latest edition of Real Grass, Real Heroes. A look at the golden age of sports when things were much simpler. The game was played on real grass, not artificial turf. And the real heroes were not just junkies that could hit the ball 900 feet. But I call this a special edition because the main topics today are baseball and Roger Clemens, naturally, and basketball with the playoffs. And my special guest, although it's going to be by telephone, will be Gene Connoly. Now, Gene Connoly, and I'll hold up a copy of his book right there, but Gene Connoly is truly one of a kind. That's the title of his book. And Gene Connoly is the only man in sports history to have a world championship in two different sports. He pitched for the Milwaukee Braves in 1957 when they beat the Yankees in the World Series. And he played for the Celtics in 59, 60, and 61. Although some people said that he was a backup center for Bill Russell. He did a lot more than that. Okay, and we'll have him on in a minute. Hello? Oh.
Hello, Jim?
Yes.
This is Gene.
Gene, hi, how are you? I just introduced you. So good. You know, I've asked the engineer to put a copy of your book on the screen when he comes on. But, you know, it's so good to hear your voice. I always love to chat with you. And, of course, we're going to talk about basketball, you know, but the number one story, I think, right now in sports.
Is that, Jim, is that a dog I hear? Is that...
I can't hear you too well.
Is that my echo, or is that a dog I hear in the background?
It's probably a noise in the background. I don't know what the engineer is doing. We're having some problems with.
Oh, that's all right. Hey, we can work through that. We can handle that.
But a little bit louder, Dan. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Can you hear me, Gene?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, terrific. But the headline right now is Roger Clemens being acquitted of perjury. And I don't know if you've heard any of the sports shows. I can't stand listening to these bums, but obviously I have to. You get guys out there like Steve Buckley.
Oh, yeah.
The baseball dude, he used to call himself, until he locked horns with me. I'll tell you that story later on. But, okay, no, I'll tell it to you right now. When he first came on the scene, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s, I was covering, it was the football season. And, you know, he came on scene and he was impressing everybody with his his baseball trivia. And they kept on telling him, well, you got to meet Jim Tuberosa. Well, anyhow, we finally did meet, and we were very friendly. He was very cordial. And we tossed a couple of softballs at him, you know, softball questions. Then he hit me with a real big one, a toughie, that I just happened to know the answer to. So I hit him with a toughie, and I said to him, when's the last time the Red Sox had two 20-game winners? And, of course, it was 1949 with Ellis Kinder and Mel Parnell. But he didn't know it. And so that's okay. We forgot. Now, 3 days later, he was on the air, and he passed that trivia question off as his own.
Oh,
and that ticked me off. And I let it be known. And since then, you know, he's not very nice when we do chat. Okay, they just got the cover of your book on there, one and only.
Oh.
But at any rate, this guy thinks that Roger, he said, no, I'm not going to vote for him if he took steroids. And I don't know if he's the one that said it, but the guys that are not going to vote for Roger claim just because he was found innocent of perjury doesn't mean that he didn't take steroids. Well, it absolutely does. You know, and now I'll let it be known now, I don't particularly like Roger Clemens personally, but right is right, wrong is wrong. And as a matter of fact, later on I'm going to show a picture on the screen here. You won't be able to see it, Gene, but a picture of the first day Roger Clemens ever pitched in a Red Sox uniform in spring training.
Oh my goodness.
I had done an interview with Ted Williams, and I may have told you this story before, Gene. But Ted autographed the ball for me. Well, an hour or two later, after about half, three-quarters of an hour of a mass interview with Roger Clemens, I was so impressed with the kid. When I got him alone, as we're talking, I introduced myself. He's calling me Mr. Tuberosa, and yes, sir. And I said, look, I'm going to be seeing you for the next 20 years, so you might as well call me Jim. He even said, thank you for that. On a whim, I took the ball with Ted Williams' autograph out of my pocket, out of my bag, and I asked him if he would sign it. And so he said, thank you, and he autographed it, and then I rolled it over, and I said, I'll show you something, kid. That's the only other autograph I'm going to let on here because I think you're going to the Hall of Fame.
Oh, good for you. And I certainly think he deserves it, and I think he will go in the Hall of Fame.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that you definitely belong in the Hall of Fame. You belong in both of them. And,
no. Well, on a team picture, yeah.
Well,
2 teams, Celtics and Braves, Milwaukee Braves.
More than that. But have you been following the Roger Clemens thing, Gene?
Not too close. No, not. I've seen it, on the news, but I haven't. I didn't get into it because none of these guys know that much about baseball and what's going on in locker rooms and here and there, and they're not really jocks. They're politicians and stuff. Everybody has their own field, and as far as I'm concerned, what I've seen and what I heard, and it sounds to me like that he deserves what he got what he deserved there, and I think he'll be going in the Hall of Fame in 5 years, as they allow whatever years.
Well, he's already been out there for a few years, but yeah, I think he'll eventually get into the Hall of Fame myself.
Oh yeah.
But the last time we spoke, you had mentioned how the games of baseball and basketball have changed from the old days. You want to expound on that a little bit? I agree with you, by the way, naturally.
Well, by change, I go back as far as George Mikan in 1952.
I remember that.
With Mikan and the Minneapolis Lakers when they used to win back in those days. And I had a brief spell with the Celtics. I hardly got in the games, but I watched them, in '52. And the games in those days were more. It was more deliberate and so forth. And but as the seasons gathered and basketball got bigger and stronger and more popular, I think was it probably came along getting popular about the time Russell came in, about the 50s, late 50s.
Yep.
And then a lot of guys, Oscar came in, and it just kept growing. And I think between 56, 57, and right on up to almost through the 60s was the best time for the best basketball that could be played.
Boy, was it ever.
And that's just my opinion. And I felt the same way about baseball. I thought baseball was at its best, in about 49 when all the guys got out of the service and got settled down and played 49, 50, and then through the 50s. I thought that's when baseball was at its peak. And I was just happy and lucky that I got to play in those two eras, and through the 50s and through that era of the basketball when it grew. So that's what was fun, to play with and against some of the greatest guys that ever put on uniforms in either sport. That's what I enjoyed.
You hit the nail on the head. I was just going to bring that out. In both teams, you played with, let alone against, you played with guys in baseball like Warren Spahn, Del Crandall, and not to mention the home run king, Hank Aaron.
Hank Aaron. Oh, there were some great Johnny Logan, Red Shandish.
Eddie Matthews.
Eddie Matthews.
The most underrated third baseman in baseball history, I think.
Is right. So that was really fun. And in the 50s with when there was only 8 clubs, you knew the starting lineups for all 8 teams in the National League and American League as well. They only had 8, and it was really great.
Yeah, every guy you play with on the Celtics is in the Hall of Fame.
You know, I put a lot of them up there, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. You know, I got to tell you a story. I've never told you this story, but some of the guys that I hung around with used to bet a lot on games.
Uh-huh.
And one day, one of my buddies calls me up. He says, "Jimmy, you got to unload on the other team. You got to bet against the Celtics." I said, "You crazy? I'm not going to bet against them." He said, "We just found out Russell is not going to play tonight, and Conley's going to be starting." And the spread is still like 14 points or whatever. I said, "No." I said, I can never go against the Celtics. So I think I might have put a $20 bet on the Celtics.
Well, I tell you, Conley never started very much. I was more or less. I played about, they said, from 17, 18 minutes a game. I averaged every game. Yep. But I never come in and played for Russell. I always played come in with the forwards, you know, and give the forwards a rest, and then play defense in center. You know, but I did start a game one time. Against L.A. Russell was out, and we had played a night game, and the next day, I don't know what happened, but Red must have given Russell a rest. And I have to tell you, Jim, a lot of people don't realize this, but we scored 173 points that game when I started.
I remember it very well. I was just going to tell you that was the game.
Was we scored 173 points.
Yep.
And I remember Heisen got over 40 points, and Kuzi got, I think, about 35 assists. And there wasn't too many turnovers because we were scoring. It was like a bunch of trackmen, Jesse Owens, back and forth.
Exactly. I'm glad you remember it.
Well, that was when it was fast. Believe me, 173 to 138 or 39, something like that. It was great. It was fun.
You know, every now and then when I have, somebody disputes the fact that you were claiming you were Russell's backup, I said, look, take a look at the numbers. Russell is in there for 45 to 48 minutes. How can Gene Connoly be in there for 22 minutes? You know what I mean? But I used to love the way you played. You're one tough son of a gun out there.
No, I tried to play fundamental ball. I only had 1 year of college ball. That was at Washington State. Back in 1949, and we had a coach named Jack Friel, and he always taught the fundamentals the right way, you know, blocking out, and you never throw a ball to the center from the straight ahead. You do it from the sides. You hit the post from the sides, and you did a lot of double. You didn't play zone in those days, and Red never played zone either.
I know that.
He was a fundamental coach, and nowadays they play zone, and it's quite a bit different. I enjoy basketball just as much as I ever did, but it's not the same game. They didn't have the three in those days when we played in the 50s, and I remember Kuzi said he never liked the three. He thought that took a lot away from the game, the passing and so forth. Yeah. And there's just hardly any turnovers in those days. Hardly turn the ball over. If you turn it over twice, you're allowed to be sitting there next to Red someplace.
You're right.
Or down there with Buddy LaRue or Sammy Cohen, somebody.
God, there's some names out of the past. You know, I remember one time in a mass interview, there were about 40 of us interviewing Bill Russell. And somebody says, who's the toughest guy that you have to play against? And he said, Gene Connoly. They said, no. He said, Gene Connoly. He said, the guy's all elbows and knees. And, But that's quite an accolade.
Well, it was fun. I tried to play fundamental, you know, and we had plenty of score. You know what's funny? I was thinking, I never went in a ball game that what I wasn't playing with 4 other Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
It had to be either Heinsohn or Heinsohn, Russell, Sharman, Cousy. There's 4. Or Casey might be. He's in the Hall of Fame now. Or Sam Jones.
Yep. The Casey and Sam are in the Hall of Fame.
Right. They were all in the Hall of Fame. So I was playing out there with all of them all the time, and it was just, I tell you, it was a delight.
You can't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it made the game easier. You know, if you were open, you get the ball. If you did your job, you got to stay out there a while. And I didn't mention Satch Sanders. I don't know if Satch is in the Hall of Fame, but
he's in the Hall of Fame, but not as a player, as an administrator, because he's been way up in the administration end of the NBA for many years.
Well,
classy guy.
He was fundamentally in one of the greatest basketball players in New York. I know back in I don't know what year it was, in the late 50s.
I think he graduated in '60.
Yeah, but he was the best player in all New York, and he was a great player too. Well, it was just, and then when you played against teams, you know, St. Louis, the Hawks, and Syracuse. I mean, everybody in those days were Hall of Famers.
Ain't that the truth? Your first year with the back with the Celtics, people forget that you were there before Russell, but. When your first year back with the Celtics in 58-59 season, that was Casey Jones' first year.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
And Sam was only going into his second year, Sam Jones. But
you know what's funny is Sam was one of the best shooters and the quick as a cat for an athlete.
Yep.
And Red hardly played him back in those days. He let him go in for Sharman or Cousy or somebody once in a while. And I often wonder why he didn't play much, but he just wanted him to. He said later on, he used to say, "I like for guys to watch for a while."
Yep.
And then the next year or two, then they know what they're doing.
You know, I remember talking to Casey one time, and we were talking about excuse me. We were talking about when I talked to Casey. It was in Reggie Lewis's first year, and he hardly played at all. But when he did play, he always did well. And so one of the guys said to him, "How come you don't play him more? The guy's a great player, and you got him sitting on the bench his first year." He said, "Hey," he says, "I sat on the bench my first year, you know," and it was the truth. It was the truth.
But that's the way it was. You learned. And believe me, you watch them play out there, and you catch on, you know.
Yep.
But a difference I see now, though, is in basketball, as good as it is, to me, I can watch one team, and the coaches have them play the same offense. I've never seen a different offense in this whole playoffs or when I watch a game.
I know, isn't it?
They all shift over and play grab 2 men and grab a guy, and there's always one man loose all the time. And to me, that bothers me a little bit. And then they wind up with 3 seconds to go, and somebody runs out and shoots up a 3.
You know, I got to tell you a quick story about Sam Jones, and I want to go over the basketball, the playoffs. Back in the late '60s, mid-late '60s, I lived out in Norwood, and I played in the town league, and we played softball. And we were playing against Sharon, and Sam was on the team. Remember, he hit a ground ball, just a routine ground ball at third base. Third baseman had no problem fielding and getting it to first base about a step and a half after Sam crossed the bag. He was that fast.
Sam was quick.
My God, was he ever?
Red had once in a while he had a play going, but not very often because Cousy always made the plays when he penetrated in there. The plays opened up, you know.
Yep.
But he had a play. I don't know what number it was, but I remember someone boxed out for Sam, and the ball went into Russ, and Sam just opened up full speed and runs right by Russ, and he's in there all by himself. He was just that quick, and he's about 6'4", you know.
Yeah. But,
Oh.
you know, we used to love to, you know, back in those days when I was a kid, half the time would sneak into the games anyway. But I like to sit up in section 99. We could look down and watch the plays develop.
Oh.
And my favorite play was that number 6 with Russell at the high post.
Yeah.
And you could see everybody as they got into the famous Celtic weave, little by little, everybody went over to the left side of the court. And there's this poor guy guarding Russell, and Russell would fake one way and then just wheel around the other way and slam the ball in left-handed.
There was some real basketball players, and well, like I said, when they had 8 clubs and you got all those Hall of Famers in there, you know, that was really fun, really great. And the shooting is good now. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking basketball now, but I don't like the zone. I don't like the 3-point shot, and they don't block out. There was no dunks like there were in our day. Nobody dunked the ball, you know, because as Leskatoff used to say, anybody comes down the middle and going to try to dunk, he says they're going to wind up in the middle of the court.
Yeah. Good old Lusky. But
Jungle Jim.
You know, well, every now and then the argument pops up about the most exciting play in sports, and I maintain it's a fast break. And
oh, yeah.
The fast break is the most exciting, even the anticipation of the fast break. And so many times you guys with the Celtics used to be able to run a fast break off a made basket.
You had hit Cousy first. If they scored, we used to hit whoever was closer to taking the ball out. They hit Cousy first, and Cousy sometime would make one pass all the way down. There wasn't over 2-3 passes, and it was in the basket. I bet you the average was about 9 or 10 seconds between scores.
You know,
shots.
Watching the Celtics fast break so many times, when you hear Rondo say, well, he had to slow up for the rest of the guys to catch up with him, you know, I'm remembering the Celtics, they'd go bombing down court and
fill in the lanes. Fill
Sure.
the lanes, Red used to say. Fill those lanes.
And many times, if there weren't enough men with him, Shaman would get the ball right in his favorite spot in the right elbow and pop the ball, you know, and make it. But now I'm watching Rondo, and he either has to get right into the hole or else he slows down and goes into a half-court offense. I'm saying, why the hell, all you need is a second man with him to take that shot. You don't have to wait for, you know, all five guys to go down.
We're having some trouble now with the little, I can't hear you, Jim, or a little trouble.
Okay, I'm still here. Dan, are we okay? Can you hear me now, Gene? Hello, Dan.
Someone didn't like our conversation, I don't think.
Can you hear me now,
yeah,
Gene?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, like I said, we've been having trouble with it. We've been having trouble with the equipment here, but the officiating in this game, officiating has hit a point where you don't even want to watch the game until the fourth period. You know,
too much background music, Jim.
Oh, can you hear me, Gene?
No, I can't hear you now at all.
Oh my God. Hello, Dan. Are we okay now?
Yeah, he's fine.
Okay, Gene, can you hear me?
Yeah, just a little bit, but not very good. Someone's practicing their horn.
Oh God. Dan, can you do something about that?
That's all right. We can handle it.
Yeah, okay. But anyhow, the officiating is so one-sided, I can't believe it. And, you know, some of the guys have said when LeBron James whacks Kevin Durant, why doesn't he whack him back? I think it's because he's kind of in awe of him. Don't forget, Durant was in high school, you know, when James was a superstar. But can you care to comment at all on the officiating?
Well, I don't know that it's pretty hard to call. They don't call turn the ball over either. I know Cruz used to get 10, 15 assists every game, or even more sometimes, and he never turned the ball over, you know, and never lost the ball either. He didn't they didn't call. He knew where to throw, and he didn't turn the ball over.
Sure.
And I thought that was. I love the guard the Celtics have now. I mean, he's quick and he looks around. He passes a lot, but he does make a lot of bad throws at people, you know, and that's one thing that hurts. That's like giving 2 points away right there, and sometimes more. So the turnovers are what Red never liked, and I'm sure Heinsohn as a coach didn't like either.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Turnovers will kill you in a ball game.
Rondo, in the last minute and a half or so of a real tight game, seems to be prone to making one or two real bad mistakes that cost the team. And
well, I don't know about that, but I just know you got to be awful careful with the ball. I mean, you can't be careless with it. You know, even LeBron James, I've watched him over the years. You know, he's not a good passer.
I understand. I agree with you.
He's tough. He's strong. And very good, but he's not a good passer. He makes bad passes. He has all his whole career. But that's another thing, you know. I don't, how am I going to criticize the best player in basketball, or one of the best? But this kid from Oklahoma, that Okie's going to be good, though.
Oh,
Durant.
I agree with you 1,000,000%. But you know, with regard to passing, it seems that players don't know how to get into a passing lane.
Yes.
And talking to some younger kids, they don't know what a passing lane is. Actually, you get into a spot where, and this is the way it was explained to us when I was in high school, you get into a spot where the opposing player is not between you and the basketball. And that,
right.
Is that a fair?
That's pretty plain. I agree with you. You know, this guy from the forward is such a good shooter on the Celtics, and they might let him go. I don't know if they will. I don't hope they don't. But you know who I'm talking about from Connecticut.
Oh, sure, Ray Allen.
Ray Allen.
Actually, he's a shooting guard.
He knows how to find an opening spot on the floor. I never saw a guy that.
Yes, he does.
His experience shows, and he can get open and just a flip of the wrist, you know. He's ready to go. I always admired he plays. And
he knows how to use a pick.
He sure does. He knows how to. He runs the guys into. He runs them into the post and the referee and everything else.
Yeah.
Get by.
I'll tell you something I want the referees to do is to learn what a moving pick is. I see these guys so many times setting a pick, and if the guy runs around, they don't mind moving over to try and pick off the player. That's against the rules.
That's right.
You know, moving pick. Also, LeBron James constantly, when he's driving with his right hand, and he's got his left elbow out there running interference. That used to be against the rules also.
Yes.
It still is.
It's an exciting game, but it's different. You can see it's different ball. You know, when you had Kuzi in there with Russ and Sam and Heinsohn and all those guys, it was just they knew where to go and how to set a pick and where to get open, and if Heinsohn wasn't leading the break, he'd know where Kuzi was, whether he was in the right hand or left hand, and just he'd flip it over his shoulder and he'd pop one like Sam.
You know what always amazed me, Gene, and you played with him. Bill Sharman had that one spot on the right elbow right beside the free throw line. Constantly, why didn't the defense ever catch on to it and just station a man there?
You know, Sharman was so fundamental. A locker, I say a locker, we didn't have lockers in those days. We had a bench, but I hung my clothes up next to his in the locker room. And just before we'd go out, he'd pull out a 3x5 card, believe it or not, and he'd start reading it. And I'd take a peek over and he'd say, keep your elbows up, keep your eye on,
yep.
line everything up, be square. And he had about 5 or 6 things he always put on his mind before he opened the door and went out on the floor. He was so and you know what? He could play defense too. He could play defense. Very
underrated as a defensive player. I think both the guys, him and Kuz, very underrated. Kuz had the extra long arms.
And he anticipated somebody's pass. He was smart enough to anticipate, where the guys were going to throw it. And Sherman, when he played the defense, he used his end of his fingers like karate shots, and he'd act like, and the guy go to the left, he'd reach over with his left hand, not paying the guy wasn't paying attention. He's getting 3 or 4 fingers in his ribs. Then he'd try to get back in the middle again. He'd try to go the other way.
Yep.
He got 3 or 4 fingers in the ribs the other way, and they never could figure out why they couldn't get around him.
I know. Gene, while I've got you here, I know you might have to leave pretty quick, but while I've got you here, you played with a guy that is an icon in basketball history, I believe, and people nowadays hardly ever mention him at all. Frank Ramsey, the NBA's first sixth man.
Yeah. Oh, Frank. Oh, he was a guy that his nose was always on the ball. Did you ever notice how he'd always get to the line? You know, he'd find a way to get to the line. And Red told me one time, I lived at the Lenox Hotel when I was there, and Red was stayed there too. So I got to ride with him a lot over to the Cambridge Y to work out. And he used to tell me about Ramsey, and he says, I watched him in the NCAA, he says, in New York, and he says, I saw Hagan, and I saw Saropoulos. He started naming a few.
Yep.
But he says, I saw this blonde kid, and he says, every time I looked up, he had the ball. And he says, he always picked up the ball. And he says, I liked him better than I did him at that time, so he drafted him. I'm sure he liked Hagan and all the others, but he says, I like that blonde kid. He said, that's my type player.
Boy, he was something else. I remember when they were getting, I think we had won in, I think it was the first championship year, maybe the second championship year, but we had just won the Eastern Finals. We're getting into the finals, and everybody's celebrating, drinking champagne, and Ramsey wasn't. And he finally said to the guys, don't anybody get drunk. He said, I don't want any of you guys messing with my money.
We got the finals coming up.
Yep. He said, I don't want anybody messing with my money.
Boy, that was tough, too. The Syracuse Nationals were tough in those days. Oh, my goodness.
Can you imagine people don't even remember the Syracuse Nationals?
St. Louis Hawks.
Oh, my God. Of course, they're the 76ers now, but just the same, that team up there was something.
Philadelphia was tough, and I'm not even talking about Wilt and all those guys, Hal Greer and Wilt and Chamberlain. Oh, they were all so good.
And you got to play against one of the greatest, Dolph Shays.
Oh my goodness. Oh, this guy, he'd run into you just so he can get on the line and shoot that two-handed free throw.
God, he was Larry Bird.
Just shoot.
One of the funniest things I remember, and I think this was in the playoffs of '54, and or maybe '53, but it was that 5 overtime game that we beat them.
Oh,
when Cousy scored 30 free throws in the overtimes.
Yeah.
But that particular season, Red Roca, of course, you remember him.
From Red Roca, from Hawaii, yeah.
Well, I guess Red Roca was the hatchet man. He kept whacking the hell out of Easy Ed and whoever he could get a hold of. And, of course, when he'd start doing that, Red would get Bob Brannon. And he'd said Brannon was the first policeman for the Celtics.
Oh, man.
And he'd send Brannon out there, and you'd think that Brannon was supposed to go out there and nail Red Roca. No. Red said, the hell with hitting Roca. He says, go out and hit their superstar. So poor Dolph Shays got his nose busted 3 times in 1 year by an errant elbow by Branham. And in the playoffs, every time you heard, for number 18 for Boston, Bob Branham, you would immediately hear, replacing Dolph Shays.
You know what? In 1952, I was 21 years old, and I didn't get to play. I just sat next to Bob Branham at the old auditorium.
Yeah.
And we were playing Baltimore, and there was the guy there named Hoffman, and he was roughing up Cousy.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the players all that well, or Red either, because I just met him. And I saw him come over, and he hit Branham on the shoulder, and he says, "Go in there and take care of Hoffman."
Yeah.
And I thought, what's he going to do? I'm watching, you know. And all of a sudden, Hoffman, I looked down there, and Hoffman was laying on the floor, and they gave him some smelling sauce and stuff, you know, and came back, and I thought, oh boy, what kind of league am I in? When he came back, and he went to sit down again. I didn't know whether to sit with him or not, you know. And Red come down and poked him under his breath. He says, "Good job."
Yeah, of course, Brandon was a brute of a guy. I think he was 6'6", about 260.
Oh, yeah.
But people don't realize in his senior year at college, I think it was 47 or 48, he led the country in scoring.
Oh, my
Now,
goodness.
there's something else. When I used to do the sports show with Johnny Most, and every night I would have a different former Celtic on. Now, when I had called the day before to talk to Branham and make the arrangements, he said, "Look," he says, "I'm going to a party tomorrow night at the country club, but I said, I'll call you about 7. He says, "You call me at 7 sharp." He said, "And I'm going to be waiting by this phone." He said, "And you make sure you get me," he said, "because I want to do this for Johnny." So now when he came on, Johnny, he stayed on the whole show, just like when I used to call you, you'd stay on for the whole hour. It was supposed to be a 15-minute segment. But anyhow, Johnny finally got around to asking Branham. He says, "Tell us a story about the horse." Now, you may already know this one.
No, I don't, but I think you're talking about Harry Gallatin.
Oh, no. That was Harry's nickname.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm talking about the 4-foot animal.
Oh, yeah, I remember now, yeah.
Okay, now this was years before Blazing Saddles, okay? But at any rate, Branham was obviously embarrassed by the thing. He said, "I don't know what you're talking." Johnny said, "Come on, you know the horse." He said, "When you slug the horse." He said, "Well," he says, "the horse was trying to kick my daughter and then trying to pin her against the side of the barn." He says, "So I couldn't think of anything to do but punch the horse." He says, "Bobby, you knocked the horse down." And he said, "Well, how did I know she had a glass jaw, you know?" But he was the point I'm making, really, though.
Oh, I remember that story.
Bob Branham was a very gentle man.
Oh, I know he was.
For Red Auerbach's, I think it was his 65th birthday or something, they had a big thing in the garden. They had a makeshift stand up, and Johnny was the MC. And so Johnny would walk up, do his thing, and then walk down the stairs. And the first trip that he was making down the stairs, you could see he was a little shaky. And so Brandon went running right over to him, and he stuck his hand out. No, he stuck his hand out like he was shaking hands with Johnny. But actually, he was holding his hand to make sure.
Helping him out.
That's the kind of a guy.
That's Bob Branham. Yeah.
Yes, he was.
I got to know Bob pretty well. At Red Camp over there in somewhere over on Route 3. They had a camp. Red had a summer camp or something.
Yeah, down at Lakeville, wasn't it? It was either
near Brockton or somewhere down that way. But Branham and his wife ran the camp there for a while, or helped run the camp in the summer.
Yeah.
And I used to go down and watch them, the draft choices and guys like that. I remember Dave Cowens when he first signed with them. He was a big redheaded guy, came down there at that camp, and I thought, wow, this guy's really good.
I don't know why Cowens is not on the scene more. I think Cowens and Larry Bird should be part of the Celtics organization.
Oh, my goodness.
They never should have left Boston.
Well, there's two tough ones there. Well, whew. My goodness.
Boy, how can you ever forget those, the type of play that Cowens had? I'll never forget him diving for a ball and sliding 10 feet on the court.
He had a pretty good little shot outside, too.
Yes, he did.
He had some touch. And he played the game the way it's supposed to be played, too. Oh.
Yeah, he sure did, and he was only 6'8".
Well, yeah, but he was 7 feet on the floor.
Wasn't he though?
If you block out like you're supposed to, you know.
Yeah.
I've seen Ramsey block out guys that are 6'7", 6'8", and because he put his rear on them and kept them away from the basket. He played it right, you know. There's well-coached teams. Well-coached teams.
I remember reading one of Red's books, and he said, look, he says, if the guy can shoot, he says, I can teach him to play defense. You just put your elbow into the guy's chest and lean on his hip. He says, and you got him. and that's it. But, God, you know, getting back to Frank Ramsey, now, you know, at the 50th anniversary of the first championship.
Yes.
I was at the dinner, you know.
Good.
And I was the only guy there that, other than the players, that was actually at that 7th game against St. Louis.
Oh.
You know, I almost had 3 heart attacks for crying out loud.
Oh.
But remember that double overtime thing?
Yeah.
But in shooting the breeze with Frank Ramsey, here's a guy that's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. He was just like the boy next door. He was the nicest guy. And they all were. You know, all of them.
The old Kentucky Colonel.
Yeah.
You heard the story. I'll get off the line, but you heard the story about when he had bought some chickens down in Madisonville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And he wanted $5,000 from Red. And he says, I'll put up $5,000, and I got a guy down here who's got a whole bunch of chickens, and we can make some money off of them. And about 4 or 5 weeks later, he come up and he says, Red, he says, I got some good news and some bad news. Red says, what's that? And he says, we had a big flood down, a big storm down there. And he says, we lost half our chickens. And he says, the good news is mine was saved, but yours all drowned.
Oh, my God. But, you know what, I remember Tommy, and Johnny used to tell me some of the stories, too, when all the guys, that locker room had to be so loose.
Well, it was, except for a big game. If it was a big game, and things got a little quiet, you know, and Red would just sit there and stare at you like, you wanted to see how mad you were. And everybody would look around, and I noticed a lot of guys going to the bathroom, and most were going in there to puke, and Red seemed to be satisfied, and then he'd open the door and let us out.
Johnny told me a story one time how Frank had done something or other. I think he made Tommy late for one of the practices or something. And, of course, whenever he was late, Red used to fine him $5. Oh, and so to get back at him, Tommy went and got a little razor blade, and he cut halfway through Ramsey's shoelaces. And then the button down, that's when Ramsey was a snappy dresser, and he had the button down collars, and he cut partway through on the buttons, right? And so his poor Frank, everything he touches falls apart on him, and of course he finally caught on. But Gene, I envy you some of the times you've had. You know, when I was a kid, I was in a few locker rooms, not pro sports, but between playing basketball, baseball, and football, the camaraderie that's built in those locker rooms will go on.
It's just so much fun, you know. But then, you know, I enjoyed every team I played on. I was with the Phillies after I was with the Braves.
Yep.
And I got the room with Robin Roberts one year, and then I was come over to the Red Sox and got to pitch over here in that little bandbox, you know, and I enjoyed that. I was over the hill, but I still enjoyed going out there, and I had to be careful I didn't hit my arm on that wall out there in left field.
Yeah.
But it was fun, and meeting. I tell you, I don't think I played on any basketball team or any baseball team that I didn't enjoy all the guys on there. It was just a blast. Everybody was different personalities, but they were. It was enjoy to meet them like that, and I still hear from a few. I still hear from Ramsey. I still hear from Sam, and Tommy called me, and we still stick together, you know. Pat Sanders called and said hello one day.
Yeah, have you heard from Togo?
I said, well, we can't talk very long because, you know, my wife and I both are.
Well, right. You know, Gene, I apologize. I kept you on a lot longer than I should have.
All right.
I know you got to run, so I'll let you go.
Togo. I always enjoy talking with you, Jim. You know that.
Yeah. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Take care. We'll be in touch soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And, you know, it's always a pleasure, you know, talking to Gene Connoly. I totally forgot his wife, Kathy, is very, very, very ill. And, you know, he's looking after her. And I didn't even mean to keep him on this line. I think he's been on for 50 solid minutes. But Gene Connoly is one of the greatest. And he's got so many stories, and he's such a likable guy. Easy to talk to, easy speaking, and everything else. And he's got that nice, calm voice. He's the kind of a guy that should be doing a late-night talk show, you know, something like midnight till 5 in the morning. But Gene Connoly, you know, his wife, and there's the book. Oh, you've been watching it all along. But his wife actually wrote the book. Gene is just a little bit too modest. But she wrote the book about, you know, Gene's life. But Gene himself has a million stories, and I've been trying to coax him into doing a thing. He says, who'd want to hear from me, you know, and all this stuff. But when you heard him mention a lot of those famous Celtics that are in the Hall of Fame, they keep in touch with him because he's one of the real good guys. You know, let me get back to the Roger Clemens thing we were talking about. There are too many guys. You know, before I go any further, I'm going to show this this baseball I have now. I said earlier that the first day that Roger Clemens ever pitched in a Red Sox uniform was in spring training in '83. I think it was '83, maybe '84. I had just done an interview with Ted Williams, and Ted had autographed the ball for me. Later on, I was so impressed with Roger Clemens, and what a gentleman, nice guy, not the Roger Clemens that he turned into after he broke that strikeout record. You know, and by the way, in defense of Roger Clemens, it was Mike Greenwell that grabbed him and said, look, Mike Greenwell was the captain of the team, and the day that Roger broke the strikeout record, the media was all over him, and the kid was, you know, pulled in 19 different directions. Well, next day, the national media was going to be on him, and Greenwell said, hey, don't let them tell you what to do. You tell them what to do, he says. And he says, you're in the Hall of Fame now, whether you like it or not. He says, you push your weight around and you make them do what you want them to do. And that's the beginning of the Roger that we've seen for the past many years. But in his heart, I believe he's still a good guy. I'm not particularly happy about him. But I do know, knowing his personality and everything else, did not do steroids. That's my opinion, and he does belong in the Hall of Fame. Now, if we can get on, I'm going to show you this ball. That can we zero on this, Dan? Hello, Dan. Okay, there it is. Well, it's a little bit fuzzy. Okay, there it is. Okay. There's Ted Williams' autograph. And let's see if I can figure out, I'm looking at the monitor. And that's Roger Clemens' autograph. Okay, and this is one of a kind. There is no other one, and this is very easily documented. Roger Clemens and Ted Williams, and it's the only ball in creation that has both their autographs exclusively. But these reporters now, these righteous SOBs, and I think it's fairly evenly divided, where guys just say, well, since he got acquitted of perjury, then he didn't do steroids, and then the other half is saying just because he got acquitted doesn't mean he didn't do steroids. But he belongs in the Hall of Fame, and that's my word. I'm sticking to it. And guys like Steve Buckley, you can bully your way through everything you want, and that's what Buckley is. He's a bully, and but he says he's going to vote against Roger Clemens because he did steroids, and shame on him. But you know, as we wrap up the show, I want to get into football for a minute. And by the way, let me say right now, Patriots are going to the Super Bowl, and I think they'll win it, as long as they don't have to play against Tom Coughlin. But these guys that are being kicked out of football for a year because Roger Goodell said they were involved in this bounty thing, knocking guys out. Let me say this. Everybody's been doing this as long as I've been playing football since the 50s. You always try to bang a guy and bang him hard enough to knock him out, you know, and maybe you don't want to really, you know, kill the guy or whatever, bang him around. But at any rate, their bosses, that's how their salaries were negotiated. That's how their worth to the team was negotiated. Are you doing what the team asked you to do? So you can fine the owner $20 million. You can fine the coaches and fine everybody. But I don't feel that you can kick these guys out of football. You can give them a warning, and if it happens again, then they're out. But there was never any warning to this thing at all. You know, and there's just too much of this garbage out there about people want to rush to a judgment. And if Roger Goodell thinks that he's cleaning up football by doing this, I don't think football needs any cleaning up. You know, it's a rough sport, and if somebody does something against the rules, they should be fined. By the way, I'm going to give you something, my opinion on this, and more people that I talk to agree with this. I don't think any player should ever be suspended. You can fine him if a guy does something that's out of line. Instead of suspending him for a game, fine him. Because when a player is not in the game, who's being hurt? The only people that are being hurt are the fans. And these people out there that claim to believe that the fans are so important, well, you better start doing something about Roger Goodell and everybody else. We're getting down to our last 5 minutes, but you stop and think about that. It seems that it's the media that keeps on propagating all this stuff. And I think that the people that do follow along with what the media says don't know anything about sports. So they just learn from the media. And, of course, most of the media guys never play the sport forever. And I'll tell you about the media now. You real diehard baseball fans, Red Sox fans, know who Bill Carrigan was. Bill Carrigan was the only man to win a world championship as a player and as a manager with the Red Sox. Well, I married Bill Carrigan's great-great-grandniece, and I met Bill Carrigan in, I think it was 1961, at a Carrigan family reunion in Lewiston, Maine. And, of course, the first thing I asked him was about Babe Ruth, you know, and he said, the curse of the, and, you know, in relation to the curse of the Bambino, and he says, the curse of the Bambino was the media. That's all. He says, when Harry Frazee sold Babe Ruth to the Yankees, the media pounded all over them for years and years. And everybody, every year, they kept on trying to please the media. And, of course, things didn't work out. And he said they didn't get into a World Series again until they stopped trying to please the media. And, of course, when Joe Cronin was managing them in 1946, they didn't have to please the media. They had one of the greatest teams ever assembled. And then a few years after Teddy had gone, through the 60s, things went bad. And then in 67, we got Dick Williams in the Impossible Dream year. And except for Jim Lomborg and Carl Yastrzemski, you didn't have any great stars. You had some good up-and-coming stars like Rico Petrocelli and Tony Canigliaro. but that was it. And but they did not cater to the media. And when they did start trying to cater to the media by trading away guys like George Scott and Jim Lomborg, that's when they started to go down the drain for a few years. But the media is the culprit, plain and simple. And in my mind, anyway, hockey, the media is jumping all over hockey for being so violent. The only violence in hockey is swinging a stick. When a guy gets checked against the boards and he winds up with a concussion, and all of a sudden everybody that gets rattled has a concussion, according to the doctors, who I think are trying to do nothing more than protect themselves. You know, I think half the concussions are not really concussions. But teach the guys how to take a hit. When we were playing, when I was a kid, the coach would tell us, hey, if you're about to get hit, you become the hitter instead of the hittee. You know, and we learned that in football, and we learned it in hockey as well. You know, and these guys are not doing it, and they don't know how to check. And like I watched this kid, Marchand, was about to get banged last year, and he just bent over. Well, we call it a hip check. Bent over, and the guy that he hit went, you know, butt over tea kettle, and they called a penalty against Marchand. Well, if he stood there and didn't do anything, he's the one that would have wound up in the hospital. But, of course, the media starts jumping forward, screaming, you know, whatever. And they go on and on and on. The sports shows that you listen to, I can't stand them. I can't listen to them anymore because they jump on something, they hop and hop away at it. Not the thing to do. And the only criteria, and I'll get off this subject now, the only criteria these sports show people need is they have to have been on the debating team. And that's that. How many times I've seen somebody talk, they call and they agree with somebody like Glenn Ordway, and within 30 seconds, he turned them around. You know, he would turn his stance around, and he'd be arguing with him again. So, at any rate, I think am I down? Are we out of time, Dan? I can't tell if we're off or we're on. But at any rate, I'm sure it's time to go. He's given me the signal. So anyhow, let me say thanks for listening. My name is Jim Tuberosa. The name of the show is Real Grass, Real Heroes. A look at the golden age of sports. See you again next time.